Happy morning, children. Today we are going to read an interesting story, The Shellfish Giant. This story was written by Oscar Wilde. He was an Anglo Irish playwright, novelist, poet, and critic. In his lifetime, he wrote 9 plays, one novel, and numerous poems, short stories, and essays. Before we enter into the story, we have a quick look on mind map. Children used to play in the giant's beautiful garden, but he built a wall around it. The children had no other place to go. At that time, spring started all over the country except the giant's garden. He waited, but spring never entered. At last, he understood that he had been selfish, and that's why spring did not come into his garden. The giant was sorry and he knocked down the wall he had built, and the children once again began to play there. A small boy also accompanied with them. Years passed gradually. The giant grew very weak. One day the giant saw the small boy had signs of small nails on his hands and feet. He picked the giant to his garden, which is paradise. The boy was none other than Jesus Christ. Let's read the story, children. The Selfish Giant. The giant's garden was beautiful and children loved to play in it. The giant, who was selfish, built a high wall around his lovely garden. Children did not enter the garden thereafter, nor did spring and summer till the giant experienced a change of heart. These 3 points we are going to discuss in this section. Every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. Here they refers the children. Yes. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars. And there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to to them. Listen the song. Yes, listen the birds' song. How happy we are here, they cried to each other. So the children enjoyed very much there. How clearly, how beautifully the author explained vividly about the garden. How many peach trees? Yes, 12 trees in the garden, and then the flowers also very beautiful and delicate. Delicate means very fine. Okay, yes. One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. So the giant went to his friend. Who is his friend? Yes, the Cornish ogre. Ogre means here in the legends and fairy stories they are described about the ogre as a cruel giant who eats people. Okay, yes. And the Cornish ogre here, a giant of Cornwall. Cornwall is in the UK. Okay, yes. And he had stayed there. After 7 years, he came back and he saw the children playing in the garden. What are you doing here? He cried in a very gruff voice. Gruff means rough voice. And the children ran away. My own garden is my own garden, said the giant. Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself. So he built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. He was a very selfish giant. What happened? Yes, the children ran away as they saw him. And he built a wall around it. He also put a notice board. It had a warning on it. What is that warning? Trespassers will be prosecuted. Prosecuted means punished. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. What happened? The poor children had no other place to go. They did not like to play on the dusty road full of stones. At that time, the spring started all over the country. Yes. But what happened in the giant's garden, we will see. Only in the garden of the selfish giant, it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. What happened? Only one flower came out from the ground, and whenever it saw the notice board, it understood that the selfish giant did not allow the children, so it also went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost, because winter only there. Yes, spring has forgotten this garden, they cried. So we will live here all the year round. The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak, and the frost painted all the trees silver. That means what? Everywhere covered with snow. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. They invited whom? The north wind. He was wrapped in furs, and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. This is a delightful spot, he said. We must ask Hale on a visit. So they are ready to call Hale. So the hail came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates, and then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice. What happened? First is snow and frost. Then they invite north wind. Then they invite hail. Hail means what? Small, hard balls of ice that fall from the sky. So, winter only there in the selfish giant's garden. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant, as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold white garden. Why here they noted white garden? Yes, everywhere was covered with snow. I hope there will be a change in the weather. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. She means here the autumn season, yes. He is too shellfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind, and the hail, and the frost, and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window. Linnet means a small singing bird. Yes. But it was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, stopped. North wind stopped roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. Casement means a small window that opens on hinges like a door. A small window like a door. I believe the spring has come at last, said the giant, and he jumped out of bed and looked out. Children, let's see the comprehension check. First question: why is the giant called selfish? The giant is called selfish because he wanted to keep his garden reserved only for himself. He banned the entry of outsiders there. Second one, on one occasion the children said, "How happy we are here." Later they said, "How happy we were there." What are they referring to in the both cases? In both cases, the children are referring to the giant's garden. In the first sentence, they say that they are enjoying in the giant's garden. But in the second sentence, it is beyond their reach. They can't go there. So, with regret, they have said this sentence. Yes. Third question, first subdivision. When spring came, it was still winter in the garden. What does winter stand for or indicate here? Winter indicates that flowers did not bloom in the giant's garden. The birds did not sing. There was no sign of joy and greenery. Second subdivision, winter has been presented like a story with its own characters and their activities. Describe the story in your own words. So, what are the characters there? Snow, frost, north wind, yes, hail. So, snow and frost are the most prominent factors. Trees have been covered with white cloak. The trees look lifeless. North wind has come to stay there permanently. Hails settle on the roof. So, like that, winter has been portrayed as destroyer. It has its own characters. These four characters, SDS. Then we will go to the fourth question. Was the giant happy or sad over the state of the garden? The giant felt sad to see the state of his garden. Different seasons brought no change in it. So he was very sad. What, number five, what effect did the linnet song have over hail and the north wind? As an effect of the linnet song, the hail stopped dancing over his head. Similarly, the north wind ceased roaring. Yes, dear. Second section. To celebrate the return of the children, trees covered themselves with birds and blossoms. The giant was delighted to see his friends back, especially a little boy whom he loved dearly. The little boy soon disappeared, only to return much later. These 3 points we are going to discuss in this section. He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child. And the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene. Only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree and he was wandering all round it, crying bitterly why he couldn't climb up the tree. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. Climb up, little boy, said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny. So he was too tiny, too small to climb up on the tree. So wherever the children played, that area alone spring came. Other area, yes, that was covered with winter, that was covered with snow, yes. And the giant's heart melted as he looked out. How selfish I have been, he said. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put the poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. He was really very sorry for what he had done. Yes, now the giant understood that he had been selfish, and that's why the spring did not come into his garden. So the giant's heart changed and melted. So he went out in the garden, and what happened we will see. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were frightened, so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter. Yes, so without the children, the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hands and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it. And the little boy stretched out his two arms and flung them round the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not a wicked any longer, came running. With them came the spring. So when the children returned to the garden, the spring also returned there. It is your garden now, little children, said the giant. And he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to the market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. The people had ever seen that scene. What scene? Yes, the giant played with the children. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. But where is your little companion? He said. The boy I put into the tree. The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. We don't know, answered the children. He has gone away. You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow, said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had ever seen him before, and the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy, whom the giant loved, was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his little friend and often spoke of him. How I would like to see him, he used to say. So he was longing to see the little boy because he only, yes, hugged him and kissed him. Years went by, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. I have many beautiful flowers, he said, but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all. What the giant said, that the children only the most beautiful flowers of all. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Yes, merely means only. What he understood, he realized that in the winter time the flowers are taking rest under the ground, and the spring also sleeping. Yes, so only the winter is dancing here. So he did not hate the winter now. Suddenly, he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden and silver fruit hung down from them. And underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Yes. Downstairs ran the giant in a great joy and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger. And he said, "Who hath dared to wound thee?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of two nails, and the prints of two nails were on the little feet. What happened after seeing the wound on his, that wound mark on his feet and palms? The giant shouted with anger, "Who hath dared to wound thee?" Here, the hath, thee, or some archaic English, that is old English. Hath means here has, thee means you. Okay. "Who has dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me, that I may take my big sword and slay him." Slay means here, kill him. "Nay," answered the child. "Nay means what? No, but these are the wounds of love. Who art thou?" Who art thou means what? Who are you? Art means are. Thou means you. Who art thou? Said the giant. So the giant asked, "Who are you?" And a strange awe fell on him. Awe means wonder. He was wondered, yes, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." Who was the little boy? Yes, Jesus Christ. And when the children ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. Where was the giant now? Yes, he went to the paradise with the Jesus Christ. Yes, dears. Very lovely story, no? Yes. We will see the comprehension check now. Question number one. The giant saw a most wonderful sight. What did he see? The giant saw that through a little hole in the wall, the children had entered into the garden. They were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child. And the trees were glad to have the children back again, that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were, yes, waving their hands gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying and twittering with delight, and flowers were laughing. Second subdivision. What did he realize on seeing it? He realized, he means here who? The giant. The giant realized that he himself was to blame for the year round winter in his garden. He called himself selfish. Why was it still winter in one corner of the garden? Only in one corner of the garden there was winter still. The reason was that a little boy could not climb the tree like other boys. He stood under a tree weeping. Yes. Number three, describe the first meeting of the little boy and the giant. In the first meeting of the boy and the giant lifted him gently and put him in the branches of that tree. The tree suddenly broke into flowers and the birds began to sing. The child kissed the giant. Number four, describe their second meeting after a long interval. In the second meeting, after so many years, the giant saw wounds on the little boy's palm and feet. He became furious. He wanted to kill the man who had wounded the child. But the boy said that those were wounds of love. Number 5. The giant lay dead, all covered with white blossoms. What does this sentence indicate about the once selfish giant? This indicates that the giant had been blessed by Lord Christ Himself. Yes, he was neither cruel nor selfish. So Jesus Christ forgave him and took him to paradise. See the exercise, children. Discuss the following topics in groups. The little child's hands and feet had marks of nails. What does the child remind you? Give a reason for your answer. Your answer. The nails marks on the child's hands and feet remind us of Lord. Yes, Christ. He was put on a cross and nails were hammered into his palms and feet. SDS. The second question, is there something like this garden near where you live? Would you like one without the giant perhaps? Okay. And why? What would you do to keep it in good shape? This is your own response. You have to write your own answers here. Okay, children? And I'll see a small summary, a small recap of this lesson. Children used to play in the giant's garden every afternoon. It was a beautiful garden filled with soft grass, fruit trees, and colorful flowers. The children were happy to play in it. One day, the giant came back after 7 years. He had stayed with his friends, the Cornish ogre. The children ran away as they saw him. He built a wall around it. He also put a notice board. It had a warning on it: trespassers will be prosecuted. The poor children had no other place to go. They didn't like to play on the dusty road full of stones. At that time, the spring started all over the country. Only in the garden of the selfish giant it was still winter. The giant waited, but spring never entered into his garden until one day he heard some lovely music and spring crept into his garden as the children whom he had banished from his garden had managed to get in once again through a hole in the wall. The giant understood that he had been selfish, and that's why spring did not come into his garden. The giant's heart changed and melted. He went out in the garden. The children ran away on seeing him. The garden became winter again. A small boy was wandering all around the tree and crying. He was too small to climb up. When he put the small boy on the top of the tree, it broke into flowers. The boy threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. The children also came running back. With them came the spring. The giant pulled down the wall. People saw the giant playing with the children during noon, but the little boy did not come. Years went over. The giant grew very weak. He used to say that children were the most beautiful flowers. One day the giant saw the small boy had signs of small nails on his hands and feet. The giant was angry and he asked the little boy who had done such a thing to him. The boy very sweetly replied that you let me play in your garden once, and now you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise. The next day, the giant was found dead under a tree covered with white blossoms. Yes, who picked him? Jesus Christ picked him to his garden, that is the paradise. I hope you have enjoyed this beautiful story. Yes, yes, lovely story. I will meet you in the next virtual class. Until then, bye from your English teacher. Bye, children.